You just can't win in the NFL with all young guys. You need veteran players, and the Eagles have those. And Julio Jones is 32, yeah, but do you think the Eagles might be able to contend with him to win the NFC East and maybe make a run? A receiving core of Julio Jones, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Reagor is potentially very good. It would allow the Eagles to even assess Jalen Hurts to see what they have. Now they've got him a weapon, a veteran weapon in the building that would help them even greater evaluate Jalen Hurts' play going forward. Is he the answer or isn't he? Julio gives you a better answer to that question, I think, if he's in the building.
Is a Tuesday edition of Birds 365. Mac guys, John McMullen, Jody McDonald. Got a lot to do over the next hour and change. Some of it is spend quality time with our first guest of the day, first guest of the week, and our most frequent performer here on Birds 365. We call him in out of the bullpen all the time, and he does a good job for us putting out the fires. Ed Kracz of Sports Illustrated hops aboard. How was your Memorial Day weekend, Mr. Kracz?
Well, aside from the rain, I mean, it was okay, all things considered. I hope you guys are refreshed and ready to go and start a new week here.
I forget how to do it, Ed. But, yeah, you're piling up a lot of innings, so thanks for hopping on. A lot of stuff happened over a holiday weekend for the Eagles. We were talking about some of the front office changes, Catherine Rage being promoted to essentially what was Andrew Berry's job. By the way, I also want to mention, I did not mention Amina Solomon, who was promoted to being a pro scout. First Muslim person in NFL history. That's a big thing as well. We should have mentioned that. But, Ed, you broke a couple stories. One, the Eagles had serious interest in Julio Jones. And the second, which is kind of interesting, Jalen Reagor fined twice last year for being a little overweight. I guess we'll start there.
Yeah, well, every player has some kind of clause built into their contract, a list of do's and don'ts, whatever you want to call them. And, one of the things in Jalen's contract was his weight. The Eagles wanted him to be at 193 pounds. That was the mark they set for him. And there were two occasions last year where he came in about 196 pounds and he was fined. I don't know what the fine was. I saw, Trey Thomas put out there that he used to get fined $100 for every pound he was overweight. So, maybe that's kind of the benchmark. So maybe he was fined a few $100s for being overweight. But it's interesting because in Jalen's case, he decided to gain weight going into the NFL scouting combine coming out of TCU. I guess that would have been in 2020. Right before he got drafted. So he bulked up to 206 pounds and he didn't run as fast as some scouts thought he would. But the Eagles liked what they saw on tape from him. They felt that weight gain was much too great for him to handle, and it did rob him of some speed. So that's why they put the weight clause in there at 193 pounds. And Reagor went over that twice for whatever reason. I don't know why. Maybe because he wasn't on the field all the time, because he did have a few injuries, probably wasn't able to work out as often as he would had he been healthy. But now I've been told that he's at about 190 to 191 pounds. He's lighter than he's been since college, early college. And he's going to try to stay there. And they're hoping that allows him to flash that speed, because I think we can all agree that he didn't look particularly explosive last year during his time on the field. And maybe the weight issue was part of it. But right now he's at 191. He feels good. And if he can stay healthy and stay at that weight, then we might see a different Reagor this year.
It was an intriguing story that you put together, and I'll give you credit for it. I did not know that that was the case, that he actually was fined. But I'll just give you my personal opinion. Do we really believe that Jalen Reagor was slower because he carried 3 extra pounds over what the Eagles said should be his playing weight? If he weighed 225, okay. He usually plays at 190. He's now weighing 225. Yeah, you got an issue. You got a problem. We're talking about 2 or 3 pounds here. was that the reason why Jalen Reagor had a less than thrilling first year in the NFL? Did the Eagles really believe that?
Well, I mean, they put the weight clause in there for a reason. And, I'm not a nutritionist. I know when I'm 2 or 3 pounds overweight, I feel pretty sluggish. But it's been a long time since I've only been 2 or 3 pounds overweight. So I don't know.
But the 90s were tricky for all of us, Dad. Thanks.
Is that the 190s? But but it's a good point, Jody. I mean, listen, those weight clauses are in there for a reason. You could ask anybody that's got them in their contracts. I don't know if you guys have them in your contracts, but
true. Well, I hope not.
Yeah,
I'm in trouble.
Yeah, John and I would be having to pay to do the show rather than actually getting paid the $7 an hour we get.
Yeah, you like to think that it's not just more excuse making for the type of year that Jalen had. You hope that it's more than that. That it actually is something that impacted his play last year. I think it was more the injuries. I think, and listen, John was there when we had Aaron Moorhead on Zoom last year. When Aaron Moorhead, the receivers coach, talked about Jalen Reagor feeling some pressure, that you could see that he did feel some pressure of being a number 1 draft pick. And that's something that all guys have to deal with in their careers if they're picked in the first round. Some can handle it better than others can't. So you hope that maybe that was a big part of it too, was he did feel some of the pressure, especially in Philadelphia, where we all know how much pressure these athletes are under and scrutinized. So maybe he just couldn't handle that. And that might be more of a reason why he didn't have as good of a year. The injuries, maybe the weight, but it is, meaningful nonetheless that he was overweight and he was fined twice.
Yeah, Ed, whatever the reason, as you mentioned, and I would say probably injuries more than anything else set Jalen back. I mean, you talked about how heavy he got at the combine. Now, that to me makes some sense, but for whatever reason, he did not look like the guy he looked like on tape from an explosiveness standpoint. So whether it's weight, injuries, confidence, what have you, what the guy on tape is not the guy who showed up here from an explosion standpoint. And I think maybe the Eagles are grasping at straws, but I look at it this way. I look at it at Devontae Smith, because everybody, and we had Chris Walsh, who's on, covers Alabama for Sports Illustrated. He said, the first thing you do, you look at Devontae Smith, what do you want to do? Nick Saban wanted to do it. Put weight on. Don't mess with the kid. Don't mess with him. And these, because if he gains 15 pounds like Jalen Reagor did to get ready for the combine, maybe that has a negative, really negative direction for him as a player.
Yeah, I think there's always that push to be bigger, stronger. There's always this emphasis on getting bigger. And for some guys, it just doesn't work. It doesn't play into their skill set. And I remember I went to the combine when Jalen was there, and you don't know the Eagles are going to take Jalen Reagor, but I remember being in there when they brought him out to the podium, and he talked about the weight gain, and he felt like he needed to get stronger, and he didn't think that it would impact his athleticism. So whoever told him to do that, obviously it was bad advice, because he's not the same player at 206 as he presumably will be at 192 pounds or whatever it's going to be. And you're right about Devontae Smith. It's funny because the Eagles have a 166-pound receiver, a 190-pound receiver that they want to stay at 190. All these weight issues with their receivers. But Devontae Smith was a great player at 166 pounds. I wouldn't put more than 10 pounds on him. Maybe you get him to 175, because over the course of a season, you're going to lose weight just because of the nature of the game and the workouts and whatnot. So, I would try to get him up to 175, and then he'll probably lose 5 to 10 pounds during the course of the season and be right where he needs to be. But that's the concern with him. 166 pounds, that might work in the SEC, as tough of a conference as it is, but we're going to see if it's going to play in the NFL, where guys are bigger, stronger, faster, and you hope that his frame can put up with the hits that he's going to take.
Yeah, I think he'll be just fine at whatever weight that he plays at. He's a stud and a star, and I think he'll be that in the National Football League too. All right, John and I already discussed it. Want to get your take on the major announcement the Eagles made about their front office staff, couple promotions, one specific hire of Dave Caldwell. You guys who cover it on a day in, day out basis get a chance, not as much as you used to talk to individuals within the organization, and you get a feel of who does what and who's in charge of what and where they actually have influence. From learning the way that the Eagles organization has worked over these last several years, how big a reorganization was it in your mind on Thursday of last weekend?
Yeah, I like the Caldwell hire. I mean, it's a guy with experience in the league, a guy who does know his way around the NFL, and I think that'll only benefit the Eagles. Obviously, the highlight, and I heard you guys talking about it when I was in the green room, is the hiring of Catherine Raish and Amina, the scout. I can't say her name. John did a great job with pronouncing her name, but that's two real good feathers in the Eagles' cap, in my opinion, to bring on, the first Muslim that's been hired. They promote the woman, Catherine Raish, to, a high role in the front office. I mean, I think that's great for the Eagles to have done that. Whether or not they'll, pay dividends for the organization, you hope they will, but we don't know. But I like the Caldwell hire. It's kind of an under the radar hiring because of Catherine and Amina being hired. So I like the hire of Caldwell. I think that, any extra voice or added experienced voice that you can give Howie and his staff is going to be a benefit, and it's going to pay off. And this is, right now we're kind of in that point of the off season where, much of the roster's in place. You're already kind of looking at 2022, and that's where I think these new hires will pay dividends, is, heading into next year's off season. And even this year, there's a few players out there that could still hold some value to the Eagles. You're looking at other teams' rosters at this point to possibly evaluate a trade perhaps this summer. And that's where some experienced voices like Caldwell can come into play, because he knows other personnel in the league that maybe Howie and his staff aren't as familiar with. So, I think there were good moves. It's too soon to say how big a dividend they will pay, but right now, sitting here, a week after the announcement was made, I like the moves.
Well, you mentioned, sort of alluded to it, Ed. It is June 1st. That's a big day on the NFL calendar. We're going to have to talk at Zach Ertz. We'll get to Zach Ertz, but put him aside for a second. The highest profile guy out there right now, besides the quarterbacks, if you think someone is available, Julio Jones. The Eagles had some interest. I don't think Julio has any interest in the Eagles, but the Eagles had some interest. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Listen, the whole Julio thing broke, last week when I was in Hilton Head, to be honest. So I didn't really, give it a whole lot of credence, because I didn't think it was possible. I made a couple calls midweek on it, didn't hear anything back. And then Saturday, I heard back from two people within an hour that there is an interest. It not was an interest or had an interest. There is an interest in bringing in Julio Jones. I wouldn't say they're the front runners at this point. I think maybe I know the Seahawks have talked to Julio, bringing him in for Russell Wilson, and I think the 49ers are in play. I think the Titans are also in play. And Julio's already said he doesn't want to go back to Atlanta. And listen, that's where I'll give Zach Ertz credit. Ertz has not come out and said one thing negative about having to return to Philadelphia. I mean, that, he hasn't said I want out, like Julio has said I won't be back, that kind of thing. And that's where I give Zach a lot of credit, is he's really kind of buttoned it up during this period and hasn't really said anything at all about it. Whereas Julio has said, I don't want to come back to Atlanta. And June 1st, like you mentioned, is, this day in the NFL where, players can be cut or traded and more money can be saved against the cap. And in the Atlanta situation, they can trade or even cut Julio right now and save all $15.3 million under their salary cap. So he's going. Julio's leaving Atlanta. And, whether it's going to be coming here to Philly or Tennessee or San Francisco, Seattle, wherever, Julio's gone. He's out there. He's a Hall of Fame wide receiver with Hall of Fame numbers. Yes, he's 32. Yes, he was limited to 9 games last year. He had a nagging hamstring. But for the most part, he's been healthy throughout his career. This guy's a real plum, in my opinion, on the market.
I'm not nearly as connected as you guys are. You got better league sources than I do, but I have a couple. And when this Julio Jones thing broke, it was the day that he went on the Undisputed with Shannon Sharp and Skip Bayless, and on live television on the cell phone of Shannon Sharp said, "Well, I'm out of here for Atlanta." So I checked in with one of my NFL sources that I thought would have some good info. And here's the one thing that my guy told me that hasn't been as widely reported elsewhere. Atlanta's certainly willing to trade him. They're not desperate to trade him the way some people are painting the picture, but they're willing to trade him. But they have their asking price, and their asking price is a first-round pick, and they want to assume none of Julio Jones's contract. If you're willing to give him a one and you're willing to take Julio and his entire contract, I think the Atlanta Falcons will trade him to anybody. Now, the team has got to want to do that, and Julio's got to at least express some desire to go there or be okay with going there. I think this is much more difficult to trade than people are making it out to be, because my source told me Atlanta has its asking price, and until they get their asking price, they're not moving Julio Jones, which to me is the biggest reason that the Eagles won't get Julio Jones. He doesn't really fit. They'd have to do some more cap maneuvering to get it done. Here's the biggest reason why. The Eagles aren't going to give up their first-round draft pick, because it might be a top 5 pick in the league this year. Even if you had Julio, it might be a top 10 pick in the league this year. They're not going to make that kind of a deal, and I don't know if a high second-round pick, like the Eagles may very well be getting, is going to get the deal done, because I'm hearing that Atlanta wants a one, and if it's not a one, he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I wouldn't give up a first-round pick either, for sure. The Eagles like that draft capital, and I wouldn't see them parting with a first-round pick at all. Second-round pick, I might be tempted. You may even have 2 seconds, depending on Carson Wentz's playing time, and only 2 first. But, the bottom line is they're going to have 4 picks in the first 2 rounds. And, if it's a second-round pick, I know it's a lot of money, especially going forward. He's a big cap hit in future years here. So they'd have to figure out a way to restructure his deal, but they would have time to do that. A second-round pick, I would certainly be tempted to do it for Julio Jones. First-round pick, no way. And you're right. The Falcons they're not in any desperation move to have to trade him. They can hang on to whatever it is they're asking and keep that their asking price. It's sort of similar to the Eagles with Zach Ertz. They had a 5th-round offer from the Los Angeles Chargers for him before they signed Jared Cook, and Howie didn't want to part with Zach for a 5th-round pick. So Roseman is the same way. He has an asking price for Ertz. He's not coming off of it, but now he may have to cut him if they want to make some other moves, because June 1st is here. They can save $8.5 million under the cap, which would put them above $16 million. They're going to need, $3.7 million or so to sign their draft picks. Julio would be a tight fit in that salary cap. It wouldn't allow them a whole lot of flexibility going forward. They'd have to redo the contracts of Elaine Johnson or Fletcher Cox. Julio is absolutely a long shot. But, the Eagles are interested. If something were to happen and Atlanta was to come off of its asking price, or they're finding that nobody wants to give them a first-round pick, and Julio is not going to show up at training camp, and he's going to make this stand, and he's not going to play for the Falcons at all, then they're going to have to come off that price, and they're going to have to deal him and get what they can get for him, because having a Julio Jones sit on the sidelines all season isn't helping them either.
Very true.
Yeah, that's true. I do want to play devil's advocate here. And I wrote about Julio as well. And you could read Ed and my work at SI.com/NFL/Eagles. Ed, Jody's right. The Eagles aren't giving up their first-round pick. They're not giving up Miami's first-round pick that they have. But that conditional pick to Indianapolis, you can trade that, and you can move that perspective. You have to obviously wrangle out the monetary issues, but the Eagles could do it. Zach Ertz being released or traded. You mentioned restructures. They still have Fletcher Cox in the back pocket, Lane Johnson. And you talk about a football fit. Julio Jones, ex-receiver, lets you play Devontae Smith at Z, Jalen Reagor in the slot. Jalen's already said he's going to play in the slot a lot more. From a football standpoint, perfect fit. My concern is the Eagles seem to talk themselves. It's becoming an annual tradition. Season ends, Ed, we get Howie. Howie says we got to get younger. We got to turn over the roster. Things move forward. They say, you know what? We're a little bit better than people think we are. Let's try to make a run in a bad division. When does this stop? 32-year-old guy. I love Julio Jones. Everybody should want Julio Jones. Some teams aren't in a position to get him. Now, I don't think he wants to come here because I think he wants to play for a contender. But why do the Eagles go down this rabbit hole every single year?
Well, it's very tempting, first of all. But, as far as getting younger, I think the Eagles are doing that. I mean, they drafted 10 guys last year, 8 of whom are still on the team. They drafted another 9 guys this year. You have 17 players who are rookies or second-year guys. That's a pretty big number of players. Now you have all this draft capital. Next year, you're going to even get younger guys again. So you just can't win in the NFL with all young guys. You need veteran players, and the Eagles have those. And Julio Jones is 32, but do you think the Eagles might be able to contend with him to win the NFC East and maybe make a run? A receiving core of Julio Jones, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Reagor is potentially very good. It would allow the Eagles to even assess Jalen Hurts to see what they have. Now they've got him a veteran weapon in the building that would help them even greater evaluate Jalen Hurts' play going forward. Is he the answer or isn't he? Julio gives you a better answer to that question, I think, if he's in the building. It's funny because you say he wouldn't come here, but, he looks at Jalen Hurts, an Alabama guy. He went to Oklahoma. He looks at Devontae Smith, an Alabama guy. Landon Dickerson, another Alabama guy. Julio Jones is an Alabama guy. We all know how he doesn't like Alabama guys, or at least he didn't. Now he's kind of, seen the light, and he's looking at Alabama guys.
The wife always wins, Ed. The wife always wins.
Yeah, she's got family there in Alabama. So, happy wife, happy life. Is that what they say?
No, happy Eagles with Alabama players. That's the only thing I care about. Let me go here, Ed. Yes, the Eagles are, as of today, going to get some salary cap relief. The post-June 1st designations kick in with Malik Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey. So they certainly have enough money to sign all their draft picks. And they've got more flexibility than they did 24 hours ago. We've been waiting for a cornerback signing. The name Jimmy Delta gets thrown around all the time. There are others out there. We still look at the depth chart and go, really? Is it what they're going to go to war with at cornerback? Today is a significant day because they've got a little bit more flexibility to do so. Are they going to get more aggressive in their cornerback pursuit? Will we see something done at corner over the next 2 or 3 days because we are now post-June 1st?
Yeah, great question. I mean, Steven Nelson is the name that always gets thrown out there. He's still available, surprisingly still available. But, he obviously is looking for more money than what's been offered. And he's hoping, I guess, that after June 1st, when teams are able to free up some more cap room, that will happen. We saw the Buffalo Bills just redo Stephon Diggs' contract, and they have an extra $7 million. That's a place, by the way, to keep an eye on for Zach Ertz. Now they have a little bit more money to fit Ertz under the cap. But, yeah, that cornerback position, what names are out there other than Steven Nelson? I mean, Gary and Conley, he's always hurt, kind of an underachiever. There's not a whole lot of talent, I don't think, that would make this roster significantly better. So you almost have to start looking at the trade market. I mean, I don't think a corner, unless it's going to be Nelson, I don't think a corner is going to come until later this summer, to be honest with you, in some sort of a trade, or even later than that, if teams start, reducing their rosters back down to the 53-man limit. If somebody shakes loose, maybe somebody comes in late. But I think that in Gannon's system, the way he's going to play his safeties, I think the safety position is stronger than the cornerback. And there's been a lot of talk about using these 3 safety sets in Gannon's system, with McLeod, Harris, and, either Kayvon Wallace or Jacoby Stevens or Marcus Epps. I think they're going to play a lot with 3 safeties on the field, and they're going to cover up any deficiencies they have on the corner. So, maybe they are comfortable with Avonte Maddox there. I know none of us are. We've seen how that experiment went last year with Avonte. He, of course, wasn't able to stay healthy either. But maybe someone like a Michael Jacquet, who's got the length. Gannon was asked about that, and he won with some corners in Indianapolis that were pretty unheralded, guys that came in and not a lot was made of. So maybe they feel comfortable with what's on this roster right now, even though we're not. I don't know how you would be, to be honest, but maybe they feel like, what, we're okay with a Jacquet or a Maddox or whoever, as long as we have these 3 safeties that have the experience. And Kayvon Wallace really doesn't have that experience. He's in his 2nd year, but maybe they feel comfortable enough to let this question kind of linger into the offseason more a little bit, like they did in 2017 when they waited until August to get Ronald Darby. That's kind of what I think is going to happen here. I think that the answer is going to come later rather than sooner. It's going to create a lot of angst among fans and media.
By the way, curveball as well. While you were living the life in Hilton Head, at Eagles practice, if you want to call it that, we call it a gathering here. Avonte Maddox was doing drills with the safeties.
Yeah.
So maybe Avonte Maddox is the 3rd safety. Or he sort of waits, because Rodney McLeod is not healthy. Rodney McLeod tore his ACL in December. No guarantee he's going to be ready week 1. So maybe Avonte slides in to that free safety position, at least until Rodney comes back. So you got to throw that into the equation as well. And very prudent, very well done, though, Ed. You bring up Stephon Diggs. I did not know if you saw that. The Bills restructured his deal, get a lot of cap space. First thing I thought of, June 1st, Zach Ertz, Buffalo. Is that what is happening?
I mean, listen, the runway's been set with the clearing of the cap room for someone like a Zach Ertz, and they need a tight end. And their GM, Brandon Beane, talked about wanting to get better at that position in the offseason, and they haven't done that yet. Zach Ertz makes a lot of sense to Buffalo. You put him with Josh Allen. Would that be the last piece to unseat the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC and get to the Super Bowl? Beane might think so. I think that's certainly in play. Would Buffalo be willing to meet the asking price of Howie Roseman? Because like I said, he's not budging. He's had opportunities to budge, and he's just not doing it. He wants what he wants. He believes Zach Ertz still has value, as do I. He's only 30, just turned 30 in November. So, I think Ertz has plenty left to give a team. Nobody had a good year for the Eagles last year, Ertz among them. I think that was an anomaly. I think he'll be fine for another couple years, and maybe Buffalo is poised now to make a run and see if Howie will accept maybe something a little less than what he's asking for and hope he budges. If not, maybe they meet his price.
Eddie, last one from me, and I had not seen this until it popped up on our buddy Brendan Lee Gouton's website on Bleeding Green Nation, that according to Heavy.com, new up-and-coming website that has got some pretty good content on it, that the Chicago Bears at one point were attempting to move on from Nick Foles after trading from him last year, after seeing what he did on the field for them. They were ready to give Nick Foles another shot somewhere else. And they actually made contact with the Philadelphia Eagles to see if Nick Foles wanted to return to the fold here in Philadelphia. And that Nick said, thank you, no. He didn't want to return to Philadelphia. The only thing that's not really gone into in depth in this reporting is, well, what was the timing of it? Because if the timing depending on what the timing is, it'll tell you something about Nick Foles. If this was right at the end of the year, when the year ended, before Carson Wentz was traded, I certainly understand Nick saying, yeah, no, I don't want to do Philly again. But if it was after Carson was traded and when you knew Jalen Hurts was going to get the nod and it was that time, why wouldn't Nick Foles want to come back here to Philadelphia? Andy Dalton being in Chicago, now that they've drafted a quarterback with a top 11 pick, Nick Foles right now sitting third on that depth chart as far as I'm concerned. What did you make of this Nick Foles was actually offered back here to Philadelphia report?
Yeah, I just saw that right before I came on, and it's interesting. And you're right about the timing. I would speculate that the timing was right around when we were all hearing in March, right when free agency kind of began, or the week before, early March. And by then, Carson was already known to be on his way out of town. So, but there was a lot of talk and rumor and reports that the Eagles could bring Foles back to be the backup to Jalen Hurts at that time in March when they knew that Carson was moving on. So my thinking would be it may have been around that time period, and Nick still didn't want to come back. But again, that's just my speculation. If you're Nick, I mean, you already have a statue sitting outside of the stadium. I mean, what can you do for an encore? You need a bigger statue now? Do you come back? And there would be a lot of pressure on Nick to come in and, hey, let's put that lightning back in the bottle and go to a Super Bowl and win it again with Nick as our quarterback. That's a lot to ask. And, remember, Foles is a guy that, 5 or 6 years ago was contemplating retiring. He took the long camping trip out into the woods, and, Andy Reid was able to reach him on his cell phone in the rare, time that he had to get the cell phone service out there in the woods. Reid calls him and talks him out of possibly retiring and coming into Kansas City. So, Nick's a guy that wants to play football on his terms, I guess, and maybe these terms in Philadelphia were just too great a pressure for him, and he wants to try somewhere else. I mean, but Nick's only played well in Philadelphia. Everywhere else he's been, St. Louis, Jacksonville, Chicago. Yeah. But that's a lot of pressure. And if Nick's not comfortable with it, then so be it. Move on and see what else is out there.
Yeah. And Ed, you got to get Brandon Graham. Brandon will get mad at you. Remember when Nick came back, he hurt his elbow in training camp, was gone for a long time. And he was thinking about retiring again. And Brandon Graham set him up with an acupuncturist. And all of a sudden he started feeling better, and the rest is history. So Brandon takes credit for the Super Bowl title because of the strip sack and saving Nick Foles' career. So little inside baseball there for you.
Yeah, nice. Well done.
Appreciate the inside baseball. Appreciate you, Ed Kracz. Thanks for coming on. We'll probably have you on tomorrow or the next day. We ask for your services quite often. Man. It'll be
you're like Tanyan Sturts to Joe Torre. You got to come in for like 127 games.
Arm feels good, fellas. Anytime. Arm feels good.
That's what we like to hear. Ed Kracz from Sports Illustrated here with us on Birds 365. All right, I want to further this conversation about Nick Foles. And again, documented ahead of time.
Jody, I want to give Tyler Dunn. He was the one who reported it, so I want to give him credit. He used to work for Bleacher Report. He does his own thing now, sort of, I don't know what it's called, Patreon or whatever. But he was the one who broke the story. He's got a lot of sources, been around the NFL. He did not mention the timing of the trade or when it was speculated. But I will say, you remember when the Eagles were about to trade Carson Wentz, Chicago was one of the teams in the mix. So ultimately, if you want to read a little tea leaves, I would think it would be when they were talking about sending Wentz to Chicago.
Do you know Tyler Dunn at all, Johnny Mac?
I know him a little bit, but not great. Okay. But I do know he's done a lot of good work. He's got a lot of sources in the league. So I did want to get him credit because it is his report.
Nothing like programming the show while you're actually on the show. Yeah. If you do have a contact for him, I don't think he'd be a bad guy for us to get on these next couple of days if he'd be willing to come on and promote the work that he is doing where he's doing it these days. Because I do find it a fascinating story about Nick Foles' mindset. He is a guy, at least with a percentage of the fans here in town, can do no wrong, that he has been put on a pedestal that he earned and deserved, but do you just get to stay there for the rest of your days? We'll come back. We'll talk about that. We've still got an hour to go. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. We are Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.